This next session will take in a range of different sports and perspectives in very different markets. So it'll be fascinating to hear how, between the five of our panelists, how they all do their stuff on a day-to-day basis. So, in a moment, applause, but I will give them the due introduction that they deserve. Felicity Barnard, the Commercial Director at West Ham United. Mike Wragg, Executive Vice President and Global Head of Research at sports intelligence agency Repucom. Hugh Chambers is the Commercial Director at Team Sky Pro Cycling. And from the USA, Christian Cingolani, Director of Business Development at Chip Ganassi Racing. To lead them off, everybody, for all five of them, Jim O'Toole, Chief Executive of the Premiership Rugby team, the Worcester Warriors. Round of applause. Let's get things going.
Thank you. Okay, as Chief Executive of a professional rugby club, three things that keep me awake at night time are digital, data, and mobile. So I'm very excited about being able to listen to four global gurus here on how they use data in their world. The three things I'd like to find out about, if I were sitting in your seat, broadly fall under acquisition. How do you acquire more data, process it, and turn it into prospects, and subsequently into customers? How you analyze that data once you've got your hands on it in a manageable form. And finally, how it is activated and the data is turned into customers. That's the way I look at it. And we'll find out soon whether these guys look at it the same way. This is a timely event, specifically from Repucom's point of view, Mike, because you recently launched quite a broad-based global exercise with your Fan Revolution piece. So maybe tell us a few points about that without turning it into a long sales pitch, which I'm sure you won't.
Thanks a lot, Jim. I'll try not to. So I've been working as the global head of research at Repucom for the last 18 months. For the 20 years before that, I was working in strategic brand management in different sort of parts of the world, largely in the CPG industry. And throughout all of that time, one of the questions that I always had, given that most of the research that I was doing was focusing on understanding whether advertising was actually working for the companies that I worked for, was that sponsorship piece. Does it really actually work? So I got a fantastic opportunity to come across to Repucom, for one thing, because Repucom, over the last 10 years or so, across the world, has been conducting a fantastic number of interviews with fans. So I thought, surely there must be something there. And the first thing that I did when I got in was to analyze the last decade, millions and millions of fan interviews, to see if I could find out whether or not there was some real evidence that sponsorship was actually working and that the value was under there. And what we found, actually, links directly back to what the last couple of panels have been talking about. And that is all about authenticity and really actually understanding why the fans are there in the first place. Because what we find, and the evidence is laid out, I think actually we sent a link around at the beginning of the conference invitation. So you've got a link through to our website where the results of this research exist. What we can see absolutely clearly is that the sponsorship that works is the sponsorship which addresses itself to the reason why the fans are there in the first place. So if you manage to understand the different reasons why people are fans in the first place, then you'll find there's a much, much stronger behavioral response to the sponsorship that you can do. That's the essence of what we put together. And from that, we've been able to describe 7 really, really clear segments which are based on the underlying motivation why people go to sport in the first place. I'll just give a couple of points to illustrate this and the power of it. The largest segment, the most responsive segment, the people that, with all of the work that we've done in tracing back the whole story of people's lives, how they first became interested in sport, all of the brands that surround sport, the segment of fans who respond strongest to sponsorship are not the people whose main motivation is a deep intrinsic interest in the detail of the game. It's the people for whom sport represents an opportunity for them to do something together with their friendship group, or with their family. Actually, the commercially relevant behavioral response to sponsors is strongest with that group, not the if you like, the game experts that a lot of the industry has been focused on for a long time. That in itself is a kind of crucial insight into where the real value lies.
We'll come back to that because I thought it was fascinating how you broke it down into those 7 different segments, and a couple of them really got my attention. So I'd like to come back to that later on. Hugh, you are in charge of commercial affairs for a brand that went from 0 to 60 faster than Mark Cavendish going downhill. You must have acquired tons of data through that time. And for a brand that doesn't have a stadium, participates in other people's events, what are the peculiarities of data collection and analysis in your world?
Thanks, Jim. Well, Team Sky, I'm sure most people here are aware, the clue's in the name. It is owned by Sky and actually 21st Century Fox as well. And it's probably slightly unusual, certainly compared to some of my colleagues here up on the stage, in that we don't have a stadium. We don't, in fact, cycling in itself is obviously a peripatetic sport. It's nomadic, wandering around the world, and it's extremely difficult to actually collect data from fans. The vast majority of people that go to the Tour de France, of which there are tens of millions every year, are standing by the roadside, and they are clearly very valuable to the sport, but they're appearing there anonymously. From our perspective, the real objective has been actually to drive awareness, and it's been to drive a brand affinity. So the primary objective has not actually been about data collection. Now that is in the process of changing, so we're going through a whole process of analysis at the moment of a data-driven fan engagement strategy for Team Sky. What I would say is that in all the analysis that we've done, there is an extraordinary opportunity out there, and if you don't have a stadium, and obviously if you do, that's really where the revenues come, obviously with ticket sales, but food and beverage, merchandising, etc. From our perspective, the revenues are very indirect. If you look at a lot of sports, then you take the EPL, for example, obviously the revenues are coming in through TV deals. Cycling is unique at the top level of sport in that the teams receive absolutely zero income from the television revenues. All of that is derived back to the promoters for the sport. So we've got some very different linkages back to the ability to monetize fans. And because of where I started, the ownership of the organization, we don't have the same sort of profit imperatives that you might have if you're a football team or if you're a rugby team. So we've got a different set of challenges that we face.
Okay, we'll come back to some of those points you raised there. Felicity, you've got a very specific and large challenge coming up with moving from your home to a spanking new stadium at the Olympic Park over the next year or so. Data will obviously play a huge part in that. Would you like to share some of your thoughts with us on that, please?
Yes, no problem. So you're right. We are on the cusp of moving from a 35,000-seater stadium to a 54,000-seater stadium. They're exciting, lots of commercial opportunities for the club. But one of the biggest pieces of work that we have to do at the club over the next few months is to fill it. So how we do that, we have lots of different strategies in place, but it is to find those fans through existing fans, but also through new fans that will be interested in buying tickets and coming to visit us. So I see with football clubs, and particularly with West Ham in particular, two big challenges really in acquiring data. The first is that the Premier League is monumentally popular all around the world. You can have content from any football club, any football match, from official and unofficial platforms. So what we need to do as a club is to understand what content that we have that we can host on our channels that's engaging, that drives fans to our channels rather than other people. But actually having content that we give either free or behind a registration wall, because if I'm honest, that's how we are collecting a lot of our data nowadays. If we have it behind a registration wall, that's great for us, we get lots of content. However, that obviously is a barrier and people may want to go to other people's sites where they don't have to do that. If we don't have a registration wall, then we don't get the data. So the challenge we have there is to strike this balance between what is content, what's engaging, and how do we drive those fans that are outside the 35,000 people into our data set. The second piece that's really important is that a Premier League football club and West Ham are on the rise in this revenue stream, is that we are truly global, and therefore we have fans that are engaging with us all over the world, not just on television but also on our digital channels. And as a lot of us will know, lots of the areas, particularly in Asia, are highly regulated, and they have different sets of rules that we have to adhere to try and find and mine that data. So we have big challenges when we look outside of our shores to try and find the data, to try and acquire new fans. And we know that a large proportion of fans visiting the Olympic Stadium on a week-by-week basis will be tourists. We know that from what we have in London at the moment, and I know that Chelsea and Arsenal also experience this. We are one of the biggest exports that that Britain has, and therefore having people come visit England, they want to see a Premier League football match. So how do we actually engage them to come to us? There are some challenges, but we will get there. We're on the way.
Great. You've raised a couple of good points, which we'll come back to the other guys in a minute. Christian, you run a number of teams across a number of championships. That's just about to expand next year as you move into the World Endurance Championship with your partners Ford. What are the peculiarities of dealing with fans across different series who may follow individual drivers rather than specifically your team?
Well, I think from a peculiarity standpoint, I don't know if I would say it quite that way. For us, it's about engaging with them in different ways. This is going to be a big step for us. We have a couple of big moments coming up next year. One is the World Endurance Championship, where our sports car teams are expanding. We'll have 2 that are running here in the WEC, 2 with Ford that'll be running in IMSA. All 4 coming to race at Le Mans in 2016. Another big moment for us will be the 100th running, the centennial of the Indianapolis 500, and a rich history that we have there. So it gives us an opportunity to engage our fans a little bit differently. As far as data acquisition goes, I think the biggest thing for us is gathering information as close to real time as possible. It allows us to then be more nimble for our partners. It allows us to see what's working as we put it out through the various social media channels that we have, through the 11 drivers across our 19 platforms or teams that we have. So it really gives us a unique opportunity to do some different things, and each one is going to do different things for our partners.
This is essentially a numbers game. It's all about numbers. A lot of my peers get very excited about having X thousand Facebook friends, so many Twitter followers, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn, you name it. Is there such a thing as having too much data in too many pots that you can't actually manage it, or you can't actually get a measurable return from it? You do this all day, every day. How do you advise clients on how to actually apply some sort of quality control to those numbers?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I've been working in the research business for a very long time, and I haven't yet met a client that thinks that the problem with their business is that they don't have enough data. The issue is, what are we actually doing? What are the number of actions that we're driving off that data, and have we got the right kind of data? And I think that the big shift certainly in the CPG industry, which is now starting to happen in sports marketing as well, is that we need to get data which is commercially relevant if we're trying to solve commercial problems. And commercially relevant data is data about how people's behavior is changing. Commercially relevant behavior is changing. We have to get to that data. And I'd say that most of the organizations that we work with do not have enough of that kind of data. They've got plenty of other things that are going on. And so that's why it's crucial to try and pare it down. That's the first point. The second point is that we have lots of big numbers, and we tend to think of fans as one large kind of homogenous group. And this is clearly crazy. I mean, the reasons why people are fans are very, very different. The reason why people are cricket fans or motor racing fans, what they get out of it, what they're looking for in being a fan, that is the thing which is most predictive about their response to partners, and also their response to the development of the fan base in the sport as well. That's the critical piece of information that you need to understand. To illustrate one other point on that, one key, very, very valuable segment, we call them trend positives, are fans who the main motivation that they have being associated with the sport is that they think that that association makes them look cool. We were hearing a lot about cool, talking about the Nets, and that's just an amazing story of how you can develop things out way beyond the sport. But that segment there, ultimately, if you're going to partner with that, if you're going to be in an integrated communication strategy with that, then you need to contribute something authentic to those fans. You need, as a partner also, to help them look cool. And if you're not providing them with activations that are going to help them look cool, then they're not going to respond to them. And so understanding those different motivations is absolutely key.
It's been said by a few people that the sports industry is actually just at the beginning of this journey of sophistication and understanding the audiences. So if you take other sectors like FMCG or financial services, they've got a long, rich and deep history of understanding customers, numbers, trends, etc. I'd like to get a sense of where you guys think our industry is at the moment. And Hugh, I'll look at you because I know you've got a strong view on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we'll look back on this time in, 10, 20 years' time, and we'll realize how primitive we all are in terms of our understanding of fans. I think the big question is, why do you want to get data? The premise here is that we all want data. Why? What are you actually going to do with it? If you don't have a fixed venue, if you don't have somewhere that you can actually exploit in terms of selling tickets, season tickets, merchandise, and so on, there is a big question is, what are you actually going to do with this data? I think the model that Manchester United have used very, very successfully commercially is actually to link their social media and their social media analysis to the broader fan base. So if you look at some of the big macro numbers, I think FIFA estimate there are around about 2 billion football fans around the world. I don't know how they counted them, but that's what they reckon. The EPL reckon they've got about 1.47 billion fans around the world. Again, I don't quite know how accurate that number is, but let's just work with about 1.5 billion fans. Manchester United, again, reckon that they've got about 650 million fans around the world. And yet they've only got 66 million fans on Facebook, I say only. And they've got around 6 million followers on Twitter. Now, what do all those numbers mean? What are the ratios between those numbers? And I think they've got around about 3.5, 4 million data sets, actual hard data sets, within Manchester United. If you look at the average revenue per user, it's actually very interesting because if you break down the blocks of revenue by TV rights, by sponsorship, and then by direct revenues, season tickets, etc., they fall broadly into about 33% of the revenue streams. And yet, of course, the average revenue per user is dramatically different. So that 30% of revenue that comes direct from consumers is only accounted for by probably less than 1 million people, whereas you've got several 100 million people that are watching the EPL around the world, and so the average revenue is much, much smaller. Where's the opportunity for clubs, for rights holders? Well, obviously, there's been a tremendous revolution in the sophistication of CRM and data analysis in the last 2 or 3 years. A lot of agencies have grown rapidly, and we can all think of several that have done so in the last couple of years, off the back of actually getting into the data sets that rights holders have got, cleaning them up, getting a single customer view, and starting to maximize it. But at the end of the day, you can only sell out a stadium once. Now, you'd like to sell out a stadium. You've obviously got some challenges with a bigger stadium, but broadly speaking, you've got a finite asset base for that group of people you've got the hard data set with. The social media group is really the interesting one because that's the link between the completely anonymous group of hundreds of millions of fans that are out there and the hard data sets, which at the end of the day, once you've mined it, it's not going to grow that much more. So, as I say, Manchester United have been very, very smart in terms of how they've used that social media group to start to build, with their research partners, a profile and a picture of geographically, demographically, where fans are around the world. And so, if you look at actually the Chelsea-Yokohama deal, you might say, well, where does data come into that? Actually, it's social data that's being used to drive those commercial deals. And as we were saying before the session here, the big opportunity here is all about commercial partnerships. It's not about direct sales. So data, social data, leading to bigger sponsorship deals is where the future is going to go.
Felicity, you've got a presenting sponsor who is very data focused, I'd imagine, because they're being an online gaming company. It's all about understanding the audience, and presumably what Hugh says rings true with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And not just for Betway, but also for Umbro, for eToro, for Ricoh, for all of our partners. I agree absolutely with Hugh. So Manchester United have been very successful and have done very well in demonstrating scale. So essentially that's what they've been doing for the past few years, is these big numbers, and also the Premier League, and we benefit from that as well. They demonstrate how big we are to partners. And I think, if you drill down to, we have lots of brands here in the audience today. So, brands and big corporates will spend tens of pounds per consumer at certain parts of the year. So for an insurance company, when it comes to renewal time, 20, 30 pounds to actually get those guys to renew again. For the rest of the year, it's maybe pennies, if that. When we talk about football fans, they're engaged the whole way through the year. They really are. Every single football match, even in the off-season, they're engaged all the time. So the people or the data within a football club is very, very valuable to any of the kind of the brand partners, because we have a already established engaged data set. So exactly as Hugh says, the brand partners want to get access to our data set. They sponsor these rights holders, and therefore they have that as a communication tool. So it's very valuable. We do have certain examples within the football club of how our data informs maybe our strategy, should we say. So we know that I think it's 24% of our matchday attendees are under 18. I'm sure lots of people know we've just announced our season ticket prices. So we have a very cheap season ticket of £99 for children going into the Olympic Stadium. We know that that's going to work. We know that those numbers are going to make sense commercially because we actually have that pool of people that will do it. So absolutely, we do have incremental revenue through ticket sales, through merchandise, but the big money comes from commercial partners, and Betway is one of those that sees the opportunity to dive into this already established engaged data set.
Thanks. Christian, presumably understanding your audience and the data that you have on your audience is crucial as you're out selling to your multiple sponsors across the multiple teams and multiple championships that you run. It'd be interesting just to hear how you use that.
Well, when we look at data for all of our teams, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. Obviously in motorsport it's a little bit different. It's more about the driver and what the driver, his connection or her connection is to the fan, brand attributes that the driver brings to the table versus what the team brand is driving. So, obviously we look at things a little bit differently. We look at the level of engagement probably more than we look at volume, and that helps us with our strategy and directing drivers with the what kind of content and information that they're putting out, the schedule of that, maybe not schedule of that content, but making sure that what they put out when they put out is the most relevant. It's not just, it doesn't get lost in the noise that's out there in social media. So that's one of the things, obviously, that we really.
And do they work with you on that in terms of coordinating your messaging versus their own messaging?
They do. It's a delicate balance because, again, going back to the term that we've heard multiple times today, it's about authenticity, right? In our world, in motorsport, as you all know, from a business model perspective, 80 to 85% of our revenue comes from sponsorship. So it's a delicate balance of the messaging that's going out for sponsors, for our partners, versus the relevant and authentic message that's going out to the fans. What's happening behind the scenes, what's happening in their lives, what happens, between Monday and Thursday that you may not be seeing on television, right? Television captures that Friday to Sunday at an event. So it's really more of a delicate balance of the type of information that they're putting out. It's obviously a big growth opportunity for us. I will tell you that as a team, or as an organization, over the last several years, we've gone from being reactive in social media to being more proactive. And that's been attributed to our growth and our commitment to our social media team, new talent that we've brought in. They've really set that strategy moving forward.
That's an interesting point about the resourcing that teams and rights holders put behind the analysis and the implementation of the programs that emerge from that. Clearly, from your point of view, it's good if they use agencies to do that. But what sort of trends are you seeing in terms of how those brands that are ahead of the curve are resourcing it internally and externally?
Brands or teams or both?
Teams as brands.
Okay. So what I'm seeing, and it seems to be accelerating this trend at the moment, is that the distance between those brands, those rights holders that are making the investment in trying to move their organization to being something much, much more similar to a consumer-centric business. Ultimately starting to look at themselves as a consumer marketing business, and those that are not taking that journey, it's really, really starting to pull apart. So how that sort of translates through to us as researchers is that we find that there are a small number of organizations which are now investing many multiples on acquiring not just any information, but specifically the information that is really, really required to fulfill that vision of kind of optimizing the opportunity as a consumer business, and the difference between them. And if you think about it from a brand pitching or brand receiving pitches from a number of different teams. I mean, even if we think about just teams within the Premier League now, the difference in the quality or the sophistication of the pitch is now really, really marked. I'd be surprised if it's ever been as marked as it is now.
Bit different from a few years ago. I always think of the sports fan as giving three things to the team, the club, or the league that they're passionate about. One is their passion, their time, and ultimately their money. I'd be interested to get your views on how keen they are to share their data with your organizations, or in your case, your clients. I find a little bit of reticence. Felicity, you talked about having some superficial data from your transactions with your customers. As a panel, do you find that people are happy to give that data through registration on websites, etc.? Because we've all got big numbers of unique users every month, but it's about half of the people that I know. So how do you cross that hurdle?
I'll go. Yeah. So I think yes, quite. I think I can't quantify how what the propensity of them is to sign up. I think a big challenge that we have again is the global nature of the league and the club. Is that we know we have fans in Thailand, we know we have fans in Jakarta, but we don't have any platform that's Bahasa. So they're less likely to visit our platforms to get their content, to therefore enable us to sign them up, than go to something that is in their language and has some maybe bespoke content. So actually a lot of the fault's probably the clubs and ours, because we don't give them that opportunity. I think when you have an English speaking fan, yes, I'm sure that we would have an average sign up rate. I think that they're quite keen to do it. If they think they're helping the club, absolutely. I think if it's a survey or just some point of view, really. We have lots of fan groups. Absolutely, they'll sign up all day long and they'll help you wherever they can. Also fans aren't stupid, and they know when a brand is knocking on their door trying to sell them something or get them to sign up to one of their accounts, and they won't do it. So again, it's this, as I said at the very beginning, it's this balance of, if you've got really good content, get them to come to your platform and try and encourage them to sign up, but don't completely ostracize them by making it really difficult, because they want fun stuff to look at anyway.
How do you find that, Hugh?
Yeah, I think all of the research and the wonderful thing in the digital age is that in real time, Google Analytics will tell you precisely how many people will sign up, click through, take actions, depending upon what you've asked them to do. And there is no question that the more information you require from consumers or fans, the less likely they are to proceed with any kind of connection with the website. However, if you start out, and it's sort of the thin end of the wedge syndrome, if you start out asking for a very small amount of information, once they are then part of that community, you can continue to add additional requests for additional information. I think Chelsea have done a fantastic job in the last 18 months in really turning their whole website model on its head. Whereas before, pretty much everything used to sit behind a paywall. Now almost nothing sits behind a paywall. And the way that you actually gain more and more access to more and more information and more content in Chelsea's website is by reciprocating, by providing information about yourself, by posting, by interacting with fans, by commenting, by taking part in competitions. So as long as it becomes relevant, the way in which you're providing that information, I think it actually becomes quite easy.
And do you find that in the States, that the initial rush to monetize the digital age of trying to get them to buy things, as opposed to giving you their time and their passion, is the same thing relevant in the States?
I would say so. I mean, the behaviors are the same. I think that, again, it's all in the delivery of it, right? It's all in what you're asking for from them. We actually have an event coming up on Monday that's very unique for us. It's, a new platform that we've been working on with one of our partners, Big Machine Records. And really, I'll try not to be too long with this. It grew out of a problem that we have in motorsports right now, which is an aging fan base. And in the United States...
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. In the United States, one of the things that we're trying to do more and more of is connect with that millennial, generation, and especially on the motorsports side. And so one of the things we did last year with Big Machines was we created this event called the Ganassi Sound Garage. And, Big Machine brought talent in. We did it in Charlotte, North Carolina. We did it as a little experiment just to see how we could engage with a millennial audience, not trying to get them to a racetrack, not trying to force them into something that they didn't want to do, but using music and entertainment as this connection point. Get them into our race shop. We had, last year at the time, 3 millennial drivers, anywhere from 19 to 22 years old, that were there interacting with them. And it was very interesting to see the reaction of these individuals, of these millennials that were there. Our target was 16 to 24-year-olds. They're looking at these drivers. They don't really know what they do, but oh my gosh, they sound like us. They talk like us. Yeah. They wear the same clothes as we do. And all of a sudden, you started to see this new, this new form of interaction with them. And it was very successful. Monday, we're on the 5th. We're actually doing our second version of this. And it's going to be actually twice, maybe a little bit more than twice the size of what it was last year. But what it grew out of was this targeting in social media of that specific profile, not looking at motorsports fans, looking at social media influencers, and then speaking to them in a way that they're used to speaking across those channels, and strategically introducing them to different forms or the different parts of motorsports, right, to get them interested. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how. I'm sorry?
A different route to the audience?
Absolutely. I think as, whether it's from the team side, whether it's the brand side, the league side, whatever, we all have to be looking at new and innovative ways to reach these individuals, reach a new fan base. For us, one thing we did this year was we went into a new form of action sports in the United States in Red Bull Global Rallycross. The average age of that fan is 26 or 27 years old. Very, a lot younger than what we see with NASCAR, IndyCar, and sports car racing. So it gave us a new platform to work off of, and now we're continuing to use Sound Garage to speak to them in different ways.
Great. Before we go to questions, which industry should the sports industry be looking at for best practice in this whole data space?
Well, I suppose the obvious place to look is the CPG industry, just purely because they've been trying to solve a lot of these problems for
people who don't know what CPG is. Explain.
So for the consumer packaged goods industry, a lot of people have been investing and trying to understand the answers to these questions. But some of the things that we've just been talking about, how do you get people to sign up, to register? Some of those things we need to think much, much, much broader, I think, in the analogies that we look at. And some of them actually come back to the beginning of sports marketing as well. Because one of the key things which is crucial, and we're doing a colossal amount of work on this at the moment, but one of the key things that's crucial is that you've got to create a club that people want to belong to. So think about the old-fashioned fan clubs. What was it that motivated people back in the last era to belong to those fan clubs? That's a pretty good clue as to how you can start to develop what the, if you like, virtual equivalent of that is going to be.
Okay. Right. Questions? Here we go. Lady in the front row.
Good morning, everybody. Kimberly Bailey from Professional Sports Group. I was just wondering, in terms of talking about engaging with millennials and knowing from all of your point of view, how do you decide how to skew that incentive to engage with your existing fans, the older fans, and as you quite rightly said, those fans that stood for wanting to be part of the club? It might have been sticker books back in the days, that kind of thing. How do you decide how much time and effort and budget to put into those new fans and engaging with them, but also keeping existing fans happy?
That's probably one for you, Felicity, given that you're trying to attract a new audience.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm trying to work out if we have a number. I don't think we do. I don't think we split a percentage. Retention's hugely important, so of any age of fan. And as you can imagine, with the move coming up, we have some very engaged and passionate fans that are that want to keep the charm of Upton Park and not to move on. So we have to be very sensitive when we're communicating with those fans, that it doesn't look like we're just ploughing all of our time and effort into the new generation of fans, or those fans that are maybe overseas, because obviously there is, there's a lot of dedication that's gone into these fans through the years that have supported us. I think, to your question, how do you split it, is that they're both equally as important to us, because we absolutely need the dedication and the loyalty of day in, day out supporters. They're the ones that buy our shirts, they're the ones that come to our matches, and without those, absolutely the club wouldn't exist. We've just this year gone into a wholesale model with our technical supplier, where you can now buy our shirts outside of our own channels. That probably seems archaic to lots of the clubs here in the room, but for us it's a really big move. However, back in the day, or back in the last 5 years, those existing fans have been close to the proximity of the stadium, have been able to buy those shirts, and essentially have been the major driver of our retail business. So you can't now forget them when you're looking at exploring external retail channels in Japan, for example. So I think it's a question of sensitivity. I think they're both equally as important. We need to grow, but we need to kind of look in the past. Unfortunately, I haven't got a percentage figure for you. I hope that was an okay answer.
And just add one thing to that, which is in social media, clearly the different social media channels offer very, very different demographics. So we found that in YouTube, we can provide a very different style of content than we do on Facebook. It all comes back to the team, of course, at the core of it. But we've had over 2 million hits on YouTube this year, just by producing some really quite loose sort of format video diaries, which are really engaged with a much younger audience.
Sir.
Hello, Stuart Mason from Microsoft. Very interesting. I haven't heard anything about social listening or sentiment analysis of what's going on in the world of social media. Also, I'd be interested to get the panel's view. One of the things that we've built with Real Madrid is coming off that sentiment analysis, is employing some of the tools that people within the e-gaming community would recognize, which is, connect, transact, reward, retain, to continue to build this loyalty. I'm not sure that I totally agree with registration walls. I think, the key word here is passion, and it is the fan club of the future. And it's a way that you can use all of these tools, this whole suite of tools, to actually build a digital fan club. But the one thing that connects everybody and drives it is passion. And we shouldn't think just about on match day, because that's about 3% of a fan's time in the week. It's what you do 7 days a week, because that fan is connecting with you. And the last point is great. Facebook, Google, Snapchat, Instagram are fantastic. Question: who owns the data? You don't. They do. They're monetizing your fan base. So you should be building your own digital fan club.
Well, just quickly respond to that, and that's precisely why Chelsea changed their strategy, and I think everybody's following en suite because of exactly that recognition that you might have, as I said, Manchester United 66 million likes on Facebook. With Edge ranking, it means that about 1% of your fans actually receive any post that you put out on Facebook. So you don't own it, you don't own the data, and you don't even reach them. So it has been a sort of a false nirvana. The whole move towards this obsession with building social media numbers, I think has proven to be very hollow. And obviously the social media channels, through commercial imperative, have changed their strategies during that period of time. And that's why we're seeing people starting to build their own platforms which have a substitutional effect, effectively, to pull fans into their own universe. But in order to do that, it goes back to content, whether it's authenticity or whatever strategy you employ, you've got to have somewhere pulling people in. I imagine that everybody here uses social logon. If you don't, you should be, because that is the easiest way of drawing down data from the social media channels and migrating people onto your own data sets.
One more. So apart from Real Madrid, sorry, did I miss someone there? Oh, I beg your pardon, I'm blinded, I can't see.
Sorry, Declan Byrne from Titan Experience in Dublin, and it's a question directed for Hugh, please, as well. I was fascinated with your analogy of the fans, you know, spread across the mountain and how you engage them. You spoke about the social media sets. Besides that, I suppose, what's the next level in terms of experiential? How do you capture data? Literally, is it through fan zones or whatever across events? And do you feel that works as a next layer of data capture?
Well, I think, yeah, if you think about the Tour de France and the fact you've got this terrible frustration that you've got tens of millions of fans that you know nothing about. You talk about experiential. Did a great thing a couple of years ago, which is the riders are obviously very familiar that they have bidons, they have the water bottles on the bikes. And what we did was to create unique codes on each of the bidons, because the riders, when they go through the stages and they've used the bottles, they actually throw them by the side of the road. We get through several thousand of these bidons during the Tour de France, and on each one was a unique code. And so there was an incentive for fans to pick up these bidons and then go onto the website and actually register with the code, win prizes, but also it then had obviously an eco-friendly message as well, not to litter the countryside. So we got a great amount of data captured through something which was using almost as a weakness of ours, which we didn't know these people, and getting people to volunteer their information about themselves. Okay, final question, a short answer from each of you, please. If you were recommending the audience to go and look at one of your peers or someone else in the marketplace, you've mentioned Chelsea today, who would you recommend that our friends here today have a look at in terms of strategy or best practice?
Everton. I think Everton do it very well as well. They've just changed their website almost entirely, and they have a dragging mechanism that takes a lot of data from social channels that informs their strategy and how they sell.
Christian?
I'll actually go outside of motorsports, and I would say Major League Baseball and Major League Baseball Advanced Media. They were pretty much the pioneers from a standpoint of a league perspective in delivering social and digital content, and in our opinion, they're kind of the benchmark that we all strive to get to.
You can plug a client here, we don't mind.
I'd probably go across to the European Tour and golf. And if we want to have a look at a global property, developing a consumer business, then I think they're the one to watch at the moment.
Finally, Hugh?
NFL.
Okay. Well, that is a stellar list of recommendations for you all to go and do your homework on. Panel, thank you very much indeed. I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you for your attention.